Good afternoon, or good morning, I should say, everyone, and welcome to the last ICE 365 webinar of the year. Today's session is under the title States of Play, US Gaming Regulation in 2021 and Beyond. And we're delighted to have YouGov as sponsors and co-presenters. So my name's Robin Harrison and I'm the B2B editor at Clarion Gaming, and I'm just going to run through a few quick housekeeping notes before handing over to what really is a stellar panel. So first, this session is recorded, so after the broadcast it'll be available to watch back and share. We'll also be taking questions, so if you look to the GoToWebinar interface on the right hand side of your screen, you can put in what you've always wanted to know but were too afraid to ask. So now, without further ado, I'd like to hand over to our moderator for today, Global Market Advisors, Brendan Bussman. Brendan, over to you.
Robin, thank you, and appreciate the opportunity and partnership that Clarion has with the industry in producing events like this. And hopefully look to seeing everybody early next year at ICE in London for those that plan to attend. As Robin mentioned, we've got a stellar panel, and without further ado, I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm just going to do it as I see them across my screen. So John, I'm going to start with you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for including me on this panel. It's great to be able to share our insights moving forward. John Pappas have been involved in the gaming industry for nearing 15 years, internet gaming industry, and represent clients across the board and work in nearly every state with lawmakers and regulators to set forth sensible policies for iGaming, sports betting, and other gaming activities.
Stacy?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Stacy Stern, Government Affairs Director for FanDuel and Chair of the Fantasy Sports and Gaming Association, and thrilled to be here and participate in this really important discussion and topic. And I do a lot of what John does by traveling to states, talking with legislators, regulators, working on sensible legislation and regulations.
I like the word sensible there. Brant, you're next.
All right. Well, hey, good morning. Great to be with you. Thank you, Clarion, for having us. Brendan, always great to join this all-star cast. I'm Brant Iden, Head of U.S. Government Affairs with Sport Radar and former lawmaker in Michigan, where I did spent a lot of time working on an internet gaming and retail and mobile casino bill. And I follow the lead of John and Stacy. So whatever they need. So great to be with you.
We'll remember that you said follow the lead on that, just for future discussions. Aisha, you're next.
Hi, I'm Aisha Molino. I'm the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs for MGM Resorts. I oversee government affairs and communications for the company. And I joined MGM Resorts several years ago now after more than a decade on Capitol Hill in the United States Senate, where a core chunk of my portfolio dealt with gaming issues. So I'm really excited to participate on this panel, and thank you for having me.
Great to have you on here. Brianne?
Good morning. My name is Brianne Dora Shawal, and I'm excited to say that I am the founder of Dora Shawal Consulting, just launched a couple weeks ago. My history, and many of you may know me when I served as Vice President of U.S. Policy for Epic Risk Management, and I served as the Legislative Director for the National Council on Problem Gambling. So my background for the last 8 years has been in complex problem and responsible gambling policy issues, and it's an honor to be here today and included amongst the panel.
Thank you. And Oliver, you're last but not least and the newest band member, as we like to refer to this group. And we welcome you to joining us today. And I'm going to let you introduce yourself and then sort of share some data that YouGov has just released as it relates to sports betting in the United States.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Brendan. Firstly, my thanks to fellow panelists for taking the time to join the session today. Delighted that YouGov is able to be involved and to sponsor. As it says on the screen, you may be able to see it, or will in shortly. I'm Global Head of Leisure and Entertainment at YouGov, so have a specialism working on the gambling and iGaming sector globally, bringing together our tools and our skills from around the world and our best practice. So really, really excited about this. I have a background in corporate reputation research as well, so it's a collision of a couple of different worlds for me. It's very exciting times. Okay, as mentioned by Brenda very kindly, we're going to just share a little bit of data with you to provide a bit of context to today's discussion. So let me just start to run through this. I'm hoping that everyone can see the screen clearly. Just a word before I get into the data about YouGov, because I appreciate not everyone will know who we are and what we do. We're a global consumer data and analytics company. Our difference being that all our data sits within a single connected ecosystem. We in fact have the world's largest connected data set. We have 18 million individuals who take our surveys. We have over 1 million variables, and we cross 70 markets. We not only collect survey data, but we also join it up with permissioned data from our respondents as well, from third parties. So this means we can truly help our clients to understand what their customers think, feel, do, and say about their brands. Okay, so what I'm going to just relatively briefly this morning take you through are some results of a survey we conducted very recently in November with a nationally representative sample of the US general public aged 18 plus, 2,000, just over 2,000 of them, all done online with our panel using our daily omnibus research service. They all come from our panel of 5 million plus survey takers in the US. Now, the first question we asked people was, actually, is sports betting legal in your state? And I was actually quite surprised to find that almost half, 46%, didn't know the answer to this question. This is regardless of whether they're in a state where it's legal online or in person or actually illegal completely. So 46% didn't know, and that number went up the older the respondent, and was higher amongst women as well. When we split the data down between the type of state the respondents live in, whether they live in one which is an online legal state, one which is retail only, or one where it's completely illegal, and just for clarity, for Florida, I wasn't sure where they should go, so I just left them out completely for now. I think they're probably as confused as I am. But looking at this data, yeah, in terms of those who live in an online legal state, 45% there were aware, but actually 40% of that sample still don't know. So despite everything that's been going on and the amount of advertising and sponsorship that they may have been seeing, many still aren't aware. So clearly quite a job to be done, regardless of the type of state where somebody lives, in terms of them understanding the status. And we did ask questions specifically about the amount of advertising and also separately the amount of sponsorship that people say they've seen in the past 30 days. We gave people some categories here, and you can see that 17%, around 1 in 6 in states where online is legal, said they've seen a large amount. This is 5+ executions on a daily basis, then 14 for a reasonable, 23 for a small amount. So in total, about over half are saying they're seeing at least one exposure a day, and then a few saying none and don't know. That was specifically about advertising, but if we think about advertising and sponsorship together, we just ask people, well, what's your view around the advertising and sponsorship that you're seeing? And you can see across all Americans, 8%, these are amongst those that have seen some, find it interesting. 9% say it seems to be everywhere. There's far too much of it, 11%, but in the legal online states, that does rise up to 19%. And around a third saying, I don't really take much notice of it. Just looking at sports bettors, now these are regardless of which state they are in, but sport bettors in general will say around a third of them find it interesting. So it's obviously hitting home, it's been quite positive. But a lot are saying, yeah, it seems to be everywhere, or a high proportion anyway, and 21% saying there's far too much of it. So not a huge amount of burn there, But there is, when you look at the group that on the previous slide said that they have seen a large amount. So over half of them are now saying there's far too much of it. So a definite watch out with that particular group. We ask some attitude statements where we ask people to agree or disagree with each of these statements. There are 7 here, and this is where sort of the watch out starts to come through. So just highlighting 3 of these in particular. You can see at the top, we've got 54% of people agreeing with the statement that sports betting advertising and sponsorship needs to be more careful that it doesn't attract those who are underage. We also have 44% agreeing that I'm worried that advertising for sports betting will cause some people to gamble too much. And conversely, at the bottom there, I'm confident online gambling companies have measures in place to ensure their customers don't get into trouble by gambling too much. And actually, we've got almost half, 47% disagreeing with that one. On the right, you can see the scores for people who live in legal online states, and the scores are a little bit higher for the top 2. Slightly lower for the bottom one, nothing statistically significant there, but again, a little bit of a watch out. This is what we should be keeping an eye on as things go forward. But in terms of some other slightly more positive news, a plurality or a net positive score for the tax from sports betting will really help those states where it's legal. Sports betting can be great fun, is equal, and all betting should be banned, very low number supporting that, and also a low number saying they're hearing too much advertising from some betting providers in particular, but that does rise a little bit for those living in legal online states. But to finish the survey, we just asked people, well, actually, are you in favour of sports betting in your home state? And you can see across all Americans, we've got 29% saying they're in favour for both online and in person, a further 11% saying just for in person, and 5%, further 5% for just online. We then have 29% saying no, and a quarter who haven't made up their mind. And I suppose the concern there is they could go one way or the other as they become more aware of what's happening. And just interestingly, when you look across those 3 types of state, again, there's almost no difference at all in support, regardless of the kind of state that you currently live in. And just to finish, this data doesn't actually come from this most recent poll. We have a constant tracker which actually runs across 24 countries globally, following people's views and attitudes towards the sector and amongst gamblers with individual brands. And we run some attitude statements in here as well. The sample size is about 14,000 people per country. And the statement you can see here is a percentage of people who agree that gambling firms don't take the issue of problem gambling seriously. You can see the scores much higher in the UK, in Australia, but even so, we've got 48% in the US agreeing with this statement currently. Now, how much of a concern is this? Well, of course, it's going to be a concern, but in terms of what respondents want people to do about it, or more precisely, government to do about it, well, Americans aren't supportive of government taking steps to do more to protect gamblers at the moment, but you can see if you take a market like the UK, obviously a far more mature market, a much higher proportion, in fact, the majority in the UK want government to do more to protect gamblers. So a good low score currently in the US in terms of steps to be taken, but something we will continue to monitor on a monthly basis going forward. Okay, that was everything I wanted to present, and hopefully that provides some interesting context for the discussion as we go forward. But I'll hand back to you now, Brendan. Thank you.
Oliver, thank you so much for putting forward that data. I know there's a lot to unpack in there over everything. And Brianne, I'm going to put you on the hot seat since we ended with responsible gaming, and we're going to start with this before we jump into some of the things that have happened since this group last met last January. But any reaction to Oliver's data over that just in general?
Yeah, by the way, thanks for putting me in the hot seat. I kind of saw that one coming. Guys, when was the last time we saw so much survey data analyzing and talking about problem gambling policy and the reactions from both the public, the consumers, and where the government should and should not intervene? I mean, that is my first reaction is, wow, look at us talking about a long overdue topic and how we need to go about approaching this. So first reactions. A little surprised about the 24% government wanting to address this, and curious then, if they don't want the government to address it, then who? The consequences of neglecting this have already been felt by taxpayers and businesses. So I couldn't think of a better time to be addressing this. It looks like we have more work to be doing to educate constituents across the US.
I think, you bring up a lot of valid points, and I'm going to take, our two operators that are on here that are obviously in multiple states, multiple jurisdictions that have dealt with this. Stacy, I'll just start with you because you're at the top of my screen. So any reaction to the RG issue, as well as any of the other data in there over people's perceptions over sports betting? Obviously, I think one of the things I would like this group to talk about a little bit is the advertising issue that has started to percolate in some of these states and head into 22. But would love to hear your perspective first and foremost.
Okay, did you say Stacy, because you cut out
Yeah.
for a second? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is obviously, we're having a lot of discussions about this right now, talking with regulators, talking with legislators, because those of us who do live in a regulated legal state, I live in Arizona, for example, I see the number of ads that are out there. It's every city bus, and it's the entire airport, and of course all of the commercials, on every show, including when I'm watching Bravo. But I think that what we're all looking at is we've got this race to acquire people and move them over from the offshore unregulated market, right? That's number one. And when we say that that's our top priority, is to move people over into the regulated, protected market, obviously we're going to have to get in front of as many eyeballs as possible. And with the messaging specifically, I think that, operators like FanDuel, BetMGM, we're really not focused on the kids, right? We're not trying to be attractive to the kids, but we're trying to be attractive to the audience that we know is going to use our product. So it's a little bit complicated. I think for us at FanDuel, we continue to have these conversations with the regulators, with lawmakers in certain states, to make sure, is there something that we should be doing? Passing legislation, will that help? Writing another regulation, will that help? It's unclear. Anecdotally, I spent Thanksgiving in Texas, in the Dallas area, and was listening to Sport Talk Radio, and every other commercial was for an offshore book. And people in Texas think that what they're doing is participating in a legal book. They have no idea. And I won't mention them by name because I don't want to start a big fight, but it's really imperative that I think, FanDuel, DraftKings, BetMGM, Caesars, Bally's, all of us come together and find a way to let people know legal and regulated sports books, right? And I don't know how you present that message in an unclunky way, but I think it's incumbent upon us to find a way to let people know that we are the legal regulated apps in states where we're licensed, and shine a light on those who are not.
Aisha, anything from your perspective as far as MGM goes?
Yeah, sure. Speaking for MGM Resorts and for BetMGM, we take responsible gaming very seriously. We have been leaders in the space in the brick and mortar arena, and we are leaders in the space in the digital arena as well. We have incorporated game sense in both environments, and being out front and making sure that we are really considering how best to integrate responsible gaming protocols. Sorry, my light just went off. Into our environment is something that we have been doing or are going to continue to do. I think also this is something that the industry is taking very seriously. I have conversations on a regular basis with all of my counterparts and all of the major digital gaming operators about the need to make sure that we are really considering how best to approach responsible gaming in a thoughtful and substantive way. And from my perspective, where we are really focusing right now is, first, there's a lot of research that's already been conducted that assesses, boil it down simply, two questions. One is there really this linkage between advertising and problem gaming? First of all, we need to understand the issue set. We need to understand not just sort of anecdotally or from a knee-jerk perspective, whether there is a real problem. We need to get our arms around that information. I think that the second thing that we really need to do is take a look at all the policy proposals that are out there and make sure that the proposals that have been out there address the substantive issue, right? We have seen over and over that regulators and legislators have come up with ideas, but what's less clear is whether those ideas actually solve the problems that they intend to solve. So really doing that research and sort of pulling together all of that research to understand the problems and the solutions is step one. Step two is continuing our industry-wide conversations, which again are going on in a really significant way, to start to coalesce around what we think best practices here might be, right? So I think that what you're going to hear certainly from MGM Resorts, from BetMGM, and I believe from many of our industry colleagues over the course of the next several months, is that we're going to become more sophisticated, evolve in the space, and start to really, as an industry, present some substantive ideas and thoughts on how to make sure that we're addressing this in a real meaningful way.
I appreciate those comments. I also appreciate MGM's sustainability pledge when it came to your use of energy and light. So I know you're getting that figured out. Let's focus a little bit more on what sort of happened this year a little bit, because I think we've had some good data points that we've talked about. Obviously, we've seen a number of states legalize this year. Anywhere from, as Stacy mentioned earlier, Arizona, which has now gone live. We've seen smaller states like Wyoming and South Dakota. Yet to be live are states like New York, and the one I sort of want to talk about that's been a lot in the news recently, and John, I'm going to defer to you on this one first, is Florida. That has been 6 months of interesting dynamics, but from your perspective, where have things gone with Florida, and where can things potentially go as we look forward?
Great. Well, I do want to shout out to Stacy, because on this exact panel a year ago, I think Stacy was the only one to predict that Arizona would be one of the states to pass sports betting, and she was dead on. So congratulations on that prediction, Stacy. Means a lot for me because I'm an Arizona native. So when I get to go home, I get to enjoy legal regulated sports betting. So Florida, it's I think everyone's obviously followed the news. In short, I would say for the consumer, we're not going to see someone being able to place a legal bet until at the earliest 2023. Again, in that state, unless there is some expedited review of the legal challenge there. Even under an expedited review, I think best case scenario is that we could see a resolution to whether or not the compact is valid or not. 9 months, 6 to 9 months probably is the best case scenario from this point forward. So I think there's a real, I think, need to take this to the voters and have them make a decision as to how they want to see sports betting in the state. The legislature tried to do this in a way, and it's clear that it's going to create regardless of the outcome, there's going to be some sort of a legal challenge beyond what's already been challenged. There's this question of whether or not you can take off reservation gambling and not violate the state constitution. And that is a legal challenge that hasn't even been brought forth yet. So I think the safest and easiest way to get sports betting in Florida is to go to the ballot and have the voters pass a referendum. And that's going to be the fastest way to do it and the cleanest way of doing it without raising any potential legal challenges down the road.
Well, and I think, John, to your point also, and Brand, if you want to chime in here additionally off of this, I think one of the things that becomes then the question on the ballot initiative is obviously there's there's several dynamics happening between not only the two ballot initiatives, but the potential blocking that's going on down there too. So, Brant, do you have any other feedback on Florida? I know you've been down there recently for a few things. So,
yeah, no, I think John was really spot on with his assessment of where we're at. I mean, as I sort of handicap the state, I think we're definitely looking at into 2023, probably Q1 before we see any sort of resolution of some kind there. Obviously, at the same time, I will say that last year, as we saw, or I guess this year, as well as a little bit last year, come to think of it, ballot initiatives have all done well. When the question of sports betting is put out there, there obviously was this rare exception in New Jersey about the specificity of in college games that failed this year. But with the exception of that, the just general question about do voters support sports betting in their state, we've seen time and time again that those ballot initiatives get passed. So as John mentions, as this makes its way through and likely a ballot initiative there of some kind. Now, depending always on how many of those questions you put before the voters, sometimes determines the outcome. But short of that, I guess I circle all the way back and say 2023 is likely when I think we'll see folks taking bets of some kind there again, probably.
One other state that's been talked about a lot, and I'll open this up collectively for anybody. I know, Brant, you and I had some conversations, and you were on a panel yesterday in Austin talking about New York. And tax rates, which I know jokingly I always say to those of you that were winners out of the RFA, congratulations. You now get to pay one of the highest tax rates in the country and not make any money along the way, just because if we look at operations, everything else. How does a state like New York potentially impact any state going forward here? And I say that not only, I know obviously our focus today is on sports, but how does it affect iGaming in the future potentially for other states, as well as New York still has this land-based opportunity for the downstate casinos? So I don't know who wants to grab this one first, but I know we've all sort of talked about it. Wow, no silence out of this entire group.
Well, only because you mentioned that I just recently had some comments on this, and I definitely want to hear from the rest of the group. I mean, it's too high. I mean, this was the focus of my comments that I made on it. I mean, this is certainly not a model we seek to replicate in the industry. It's not something we're looking to duplicate. I mean, I think that it was we hope a one-off situation of the governor strongly influencing the legislation in a way that I guess the former governor in the way that he wanted to roll out in the state. It's disappointing because, as you say, Brendan, it'll be very difficult to make any real significant dollars there. You likely will have your large whales, your big bettors, your sharp bettors that are always looking to get that half a point better, probably shopping those lines and likely ending up right back in New Jersey where they started in the first place, which was as the media reported many times, the hope that the legislature and the governor didn't want. They wanted to bring those dollars back in New York, and they'll get some. They'll pick up the average folks that are out there just wagering every once in a while on an NFL game, baseball game, etc. But meaningful dollars, you may see those wind up right back in New Jersey again.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say the good news is 2/3 of the states have already passed sports betting, so it's not going to be a model for many, and that's probably the good news here. The bad news is, as Brandon indicated, it's going to be a difficult market for operators to make money, but I suspect they will find a way to make this a successful opportunity to expand their brand, expand their reach. It'll have an ability to impact their products in other markets. I think being in New York, you'd rather be in New York than not be in New York, regardless of the tax rate. I think that's kind of where I would be looking at it. And hopefully there's a way that it can work for the benefit of the state and for the benefit of the operator. The fact of the matter is, many people, including myself, warned and talked to the governor's office and others to say, hey, a tax rate like this, you may not get the revenue that you're projecting, but let's just say they were warned, and we'll see what the outcomes are.
John. Well, I want to challenge John on that particular point and just ask him a question from that. And by the way, I agree with the premise that you'd rather be in it than out of it, and maybe the operators have some insight on this. But what other industry, John, do legislators kill the golden goose before it can even grow and start to lay fruitful eggs? I mean, as I think about it, I put my former legislative cap on. I mean, we intentionally focused on large economic development bills, etc., for the purpose of growing and nurturing an industry so then it can be successful down the road. If you kill that before it even gets started with the astronomically high tax rates, how do you expect this to be successful going forward? Now, I'm not saying it'll just fizzle out. I'm not making that proposition at all. I'm just simply saying that what other industry have we seen this in as legislators look to try to identify tax rates?
Yeah, I mean, I think the problem in New York is that people viewed this as a cash cow, right? And how do we extract as much milk from that cow as quickly as possible? And I think there were other solutions to that by making it maybe a different approach to the market. They choose to do it with the tax rate. That's how they're going to try to extract as much money out of the market as possible. And we'll see if it succeeds. As I said, I think we warned them that that is probably not the best way to create a thriving market. But New York is going to test this out, and I'm hopeful that all the operators there find a way to find success.
I mean, I think for FanDuel, we're thrilled to get to participate in New York, and it's a really important state. And I think, Brendan, to your question about how is this going to impact other states, it won't really. We talk about this all the time, that each state sort of has its own identity. Legislators across different states think very differently about tax rates, about fees. So, an impact on North Carolina or Texas, not really. Maybe a little bit on a state like a Vermont or a Maine, but I just think that states really do cling to their own identities a lot of times, and they want to do things their way. They may look at it as a lesson of what not to do, or maybe that is pushing the tax rate too high. That, fingers crossed. But Brant, John, you're right. We are happy to participate in New York and be part of it, because it would surely be disappointing to be on the outside looking in.
Anybody else from our esteemed panel have comments on New York? Otherwise, I want to shift to a few other states before we jump into next year. Let me jump into another state that just recently passed, and I will remind our audience, if you do have specific questions about stuff that's passed this year or what the prospects look like for, as Stacy just mentioned, North Carolina, Texas, some of those we'll get into here shortly. But Ohio, I will say that I always joke that they finally got sports betting passed because Harbaugh finally beat him in football along the way. But how does a state that literally has debated this for 3 years, and Aisha, I'm going to turn it over to you because obviously you have operations there. What do the prospects look like for a bill that said, hey, let's get it done by 23?
First of all, we're thrilled to finally have the bill done. This has been a very long, arduous process, and quite frankly, we're pretty happy with the outcome as well. I think that there were a lot of different considerations that the legislature had to account for, and they did, I think, a good job trying to square all those circles. In terms of 2023, we will remain ever optimistic that timeline will move up. We will remain ever optimistic that we can work with the regulators in order to speed the process along and see if that's possible. But certainly I think it's taken us 3 years of very, very active work to get to this point, and so we're going to take a moment and celebrate that it finally passed.
Brianne, I know you did a lot of work over the years in Ohio. Any feedback on the bill from your perspective?
From my perspective, a little less elation, unfortunately. Just another case of 1/3 of the states that have recently legalized sports wagering aren't really making any investment or sizable considerations by way of combating the harm that can come from some. So a little disappointing on that front, although Ohio, unlike some of the others, does have an existing infrastructure that is aggressively dealing with problem and responsible gambling, but we always like to see that increased with new forms of gambling. So disappointing there, especially given the fact that it's a huge collegiate athlete market. We are worried about the implications of mental health and what that means for athletes. So I'm hoping there's room with the regulatory process to build that out. So not as elated, happy to see it cross the finish line in many respects, but I think there's some work to be done as we look at the rules and regs.
You know, as we look back on 2021, and as we mentioned, there's a host of states that did. And I don't want to, I know we've talked about a few of the, you know, the high tax rates in New York as mobile gets ready to launch. But, you know, what are the nuggets we want to take away from 2021 to give to legislators looking to do this in 2022? Or what things do you see heading into 22 that people may do reforms? You know, like Arizona that offered a different model of giving teams direct licenses in a much more meaningful way than, say, Virginia and Illinois has previously, or DC, off of that. And you know, what nuggets do you guys take out of that? And John, I'm going to first throw it over to you.
Well, I mean, I think my first ask for any state that's looking to expand gaming is do a full modernization of your gaming program that isn't just about sports betting, but also looks at iGaming, internet poker, online lottery, things, really a holistic approach. It's, as we know in this business, it's very difficult to get legislation passed. So now we're in the process of going back to a number of the states that have already passed sports betting and talking about iGaming. And it may have been better to have had that conversation 2 years ago rather than now. That way these bills would have been an iGaming and sports betting state. Michigan did it right, Pennsylvania did it right, Connecticut's done it right. We believe I believe that that's probably the best path for the remaining states, is that if they can really seriously look at both sports and iGaming as a package rather than trying to separate them out. In terms of, you know, policies moving forward, I think where we've seen the most success is when there is, you know, a competitive marketplace that allows for the land-based entities to be involved in the market, have either multiple skins, or, you know, when you're able to bring in other entities, whether it be an off-track betting parlor or a sports team or other, to offer these activities. I think that's in the best interest of the consumer. It creates a larger taxable base for the state, larger upfront fee, more upfront fees in terms of licensing. So creating competitive market, and then also, like I said, making sure that we're not just narrowly focused on sports betting, but looking at the broader picture of modernizing the entire gaming system there, because mobile betting is the future here, and you might as well get out on the ground floor of it rather than waiting to catch up.
Oliver, I know you shared some data with us early on here in that. What nuggets should, as we look to 2022, and obviously, you know, as we sort of transition our conversation from the 21 states that legalized and everything before, what nuggets do you take out of the data that you were able to share with us this morning that might be valuable?
I think for us, looking at those numbers, it's a watcher. There are a number of things in there which I think we just have to keep an eye on, and we have to keep an eye on them potentially in some of these key states, some of the early mover states as well, to see what learnings there might be elsewhere. I think you can obviously look at this data at a national level and come to a conclusion, but when you do drill down, there are some slightly more concerning numbers in there we just have to be careful of. The areas around responsible gambling, obviously, and I think the learnings from Europe and other markets, it's important to take them seriously, but the US is a different market, and not just because of the maturity of online, but I just think we do need to keep an eye on some of those areas as well, and just ensure that that people understand. I think there is a lack of knowledge, and we often see this, these questions about people having concerns about an industry that perhaps they don't understand. And so some of this is around not simply an education of what it is, but actually how it operates. I think speaking earlier, the point was made, why is there a clear link? No, there isn't between the amount of advertising somebody's exposed to and problem gambling. We need to do the research. We need to understand exactly what this is, and there need to be the tools in place as well to deal with this. So I think for me, those are the key points. The market is just so immature. There is a lot that we just need to understand. But I think always being on the front foot with these issues is going to be sensible.
Stacey, I'm going to turn to you as we close our discussion on 21. Arizona, your home state, obviously took a different model of balancing tribal interests with gaming that obviously can play a bigger role probably in the final states that are yet to legalize, and teams. From that perspective, what are the good things we should take out of that, and what are some of the other things we need to be a little bit cautionary on?
Well, I think it was a tricky balance for the governor here to determine, all right, he knew he wanted sports betting, and these were conversations that were ongoing for a number of years with the tribes and negotiating new compacts. But sports betting was just a little piece of that, right? I mean, I think that gets lost sometimes when looking at the larger compact negotiations that included, additional table games and more slots and more casinos. And so I think that because sports betting was kind of a smaller piece, that way the governor's office was able to negotiate licenses for the teams and the teams wanting to be engaged. And that's a tricky balance too, because this is gaming. These are not entities that are traditionally licensed for gaming. And so making sure that the teams were then working with operators who are licensed and know how to operate in the gaming space. So, I think we've seen other states now, like Ohio, looking at, all right, teams are going to get licensed, and this is how we're going to continue to move forward. The leagues are still trying to figure out, and the teams are still trying to figure out what that means to hold the license and what they're responsible for and accountable for. With regard to responsible gaming, though, and advertising, I think it's actually a positive for the teams to be engaged at this level, and knowing that they take their product very seriously. Regulated gaming is very serious, and I think there's actually a way to bring people into the light. And if there is an issue, that they can see very clearly where they can call and who they can reach out to get help. So I think it helps to have the teams engaged at this level to potentially bring people to problem gaming resources that they may need.
Thank you. Let's transition into 2022 and what lies ahead. I will remind the audience we've got about 15 minutes left. We've got some good questions in there so far. We'll get to those here shortly, but if you have additional ones, please feel free to chime in. Obviously, one state that obviously is in focus is California. One state that's not in focus is Texas, which, unless anybody on this panel disagrees with me, would have had sports betting on the ballot had it not been for land-based initiatives to come up. But what are the prospects lie ahead off of a state like California that's going to have 1, 2, 3 potential, maybe 4 ballot measures out there? What does that look like across the way to get that on the ballot first and foremost? But then what does that look like for voters as they head to the ballot box in November? Brant, you want to start on that one? I don't want to conflict anybody that may have a ballot initiative they prefer out there.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, I mean, here's what I think, and by the way, I say this without knowing any insider information. But here's what I think may happen. I think what you will likely see is some coalitions potentially come together in some fashion, right? I think that any sort of political operative out there understands that the more questions you throw before the voters, the more likely there is for potential confusion, and that could nix the whole thing. I think that the groups that are sort of putting these different proposals forward are certainly still engaged in probably having some commercial conversations as to how that looks and how things could roll out. And again, I say that without I'm just speculating on said topic here. So, you know, I think it's just one of these things where as these conversations continue to come together, you'll hopefully see perhaps, you know, a couple large groups get together behind one initiative that would go before the voters. I mean, at this point in time, there's only one ballot initiative that's actually collected the signatures, and we know will be on the ballot. I think you're right. We could see up to 4. I just don't think that will happen. I think that that hopefully it will shake itself out. And I think that there's a couple other things at play. I think that there's a lot of conversations about the Michigan, Connecticut, Arizona model versus the Florida model and how that plays into California and what that looks like. I think that with the now court challenges that you're seeing in Florida, that may change the conversation in California a little bit, back to more of the tribal commercial models you see in those other 3 states I just mentioned.
Anybody else? Go ahead.
Well, I think the big takeaway for California, and I think no one's going to know until we know, right? I mean, the ballot, the signature collection thing is kind of a mystery, and we're not going to have the answers until we see who actually gets the signatures. But it would be a huge mistake for California to put towards the voters only the option for retail sports betting. That would be the biggest mistake. There needs to be an option for mobile betting for the voters, because that's what they want. The consumer wants, and I think the tribes, who are extremely important in that state, are also recognizing that there is value to taking mobile bets in the state, and how they can do that in a legal way that also helps build their brand and their business, and quite frankly their bottom line is really important. And I think we're getting closer to that than we've ever been before. So I'm optimistic that a pathway to legal online sports betting in California is becoming much clearer than it was, let's say, a year ago when we were talking.
Yeah, and Brendan, I'm happy to briefly touch on that as well. That MGM, along with 6 other companies, has been funding and strongly supportive of one of the ballot initiatives, and this is a ballot initiative that would allow for statewide mobile through a commercial regulated framework, but one that is very respectful of and requires coordination with and market access through the California tribes. You know, there's been a lot of confusion out there about what each of the ballot initiatives does, just because they're long, they're weedy, they're complex, and there are so many of them. But for purposes of this one, I think there are a couple of key takeaways. First of all, to John's point, you know, based on all the research we've done, all the polling that we've seen, we believe that there is appetite in California to legalize mobile sports betting. Point 2 is that we are very cognizant and respectful of the importance of gaming from an economic perspective and historical perspective to the California gaming tribes. And so our initiative is drafted very specifically and purposefully to require ultimately that market access is realized only through an agreement with one of those tribes. And, you know, we think that ultimately our path forward is one that does the best thing for the voters in California and the consumers in California that want legalized sports betting. We think, again, that we have done this thoughtfully and in a manner that is respectful of the tribal interests. And ultimately, we think that our initiative also has the best opportunity to raise meaningful revenue for the state of California. We received our initial score, and you know, we think that it shows that this is going to raise meaningful dollars for the state, and all of those things are important. So John's correct. Time to tell where each of the initiatives ends up in terms of qualifying for the ballot. We are very hopeful of and confident in our chances to qualify. This is a very well-funded effort. You know, it is a serious state. We take it very seriously, but we think that we have done a lot of work to thread this needle. in a way that that we hope is one that can draw support from a variety of different interests in the state.
Anybody else have anything on California? Otherwise, I'd like to get to 2 of these questions, and then I'm going to put everybody on the hot seat to say which states are going to go in 2022. So the first question came from a member of the audience. They said, on the advertising front, in Colorado, regulators have, quote, warned operators to ratchet back on advertising before lawmakers do it. What's the right balance? Does the NFL have it right by limiting the number of ads per game, or does Fox have it right in integrating odds and other things into their broadcast? Oliver, I'm going to start with you, since you started, with some of this data, and turn it over to you real quick to answer that, if that's okay.
You can try, Brendan, but I don't think I have the answer for that one at the moment. I mean, we looking at other markets, we've had whistle-to-whistle bans in the UK, which have come in. So there's nothing during for in play, essentially, while the game is live. There have been different models tried in different places. I don't think we have an answer right now, but in terms of in any given state, we just need to be cognizant of whether these things do need to be leveled out a little more. That's all I would say on that one.
Brianne, you look like you're ready to chime in.
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on it. I'm obviously quite concerned around the implications of the amount of advertising, the influence it has both on the consumer and the vulnerable consumer. The research that we do have out of the UK does emphatically declare that 1/3 of British gamblers are influenced by the marketing and the advertising, and they do have a tremendous amount of individuals who are struggling with gambling addiction. Now, that being said, I am also well aware that the US is different and we are not the UK, and there are differences. But is there over an abundance? Are people being concerned? Is there targeting and predatory advertising taking place? I'm worried. There needs to be a balance, and I don't believe that it resides simply with one entity. We've heard one regulator say, industry, get together, figure it out before I come in. Do I think a sweeping oversight from a regulator is also the solution? No, I think that all those that are profiting and benefiting bear the responsibility to be at the table alongside the consumers, alongside problem gambling advocates and researchers, talking about what is the solution here. But neglecting it's also probably not a good idea.
Very good. We've got about 5 minutes left. I want to get back to one more question here. And this one basically says, you guys have talked a lot about tax rates. And obviously, New York has come into focus because of its high tax rate. How do you get lawmakers to understand the push-pull effects that happen with tax rates? And how that can affect operations in the market? Stacey, you want to take that one first? You look like you're anxious.
Well, no, I was going to say this is Brant. This is his baby. Listen, all we can do is continue to try to educate legislators about the product. I think this is where the disconnect is a lot of times, is when legislators who have 50 other bills they're working on, trying to understand how sports betting works and what tax rate would be a good fit. It's explaining the actual product and all that goes into it to get them to, and I always say kind of close to a like 10% rate would be great and would work for us, but I know Brant says much lower.
Brant, I'm going to defer to you next.
Yeah, she put me on the hot seat. Now I'm in trouble now. Look, Michigan's 8.4 on sports, but I still remember the day, Brendan, where you picked up the phone the minute after we got the bill done, and you laid into me about that 25% iGaming tax rate. So I get it, man. Look, this is something that I do talk about a lot, because this just comes back to killing the golden goose, as I like to say, but also here's the thing. It's just. It doesn't make sense to overtax an industry that just doesn't have huge margins in it to begin with, but that's why sports is different than the iCasino piece. But Brendan, what is the magic? I got asked the other day. I was asked the question. I didn't know you had. Brent, what is the magic number? I love 8.4 for sports, but it's the Michigan number. Brendan, what do you like?
Well, do you want my personal or my professional opinion?
Go ahead.
Because my personal opinion is a heck of a lot lower than the 8.4, because I'm a no tax guy. So, when we first, as a firm, went in to start doing these assessments, and we've looked at it on sports and as well as the iGaming piece, and basically came back to the conclusion when you're looking at all of this from an operational standpoint, anything above 15%, it gets really difficult. And we have been very consistent across the way in saying that, just because, as I always said, as we've done these studies, you can't say 40% is a magic number or 50% is a magic number in one state because you have somebody whispering in your ear to say to do this. That's why we've always been very static in saying, hey, we're going to give what understanding the industry that we do at 15%. So, other studies out there, can show everything else, but, looking at how operationally this works and everything else, anything above 15. Personally, go well below that 8.4. We're great with our 6.75 here in Nevada. So we've got 3 minutes left, and with obviously the tax rate issue somewhat resolved, I'm going to go to all of you and ask for your states that are going to move in 2022, both from sports and potentially iGaming, which I know, John, you probably have a whole host of those. And then we'll see who gets the congratulatory piece when we do this at some point in 2022. So, Oliver, I'm going to start with you. You're first on my screen. Any predictions for 2022?
No, I'm completely going to pass this one, Brennan. I'm really sorry. So I will just look back and perhaps laugh or perhaps applaud in a year's time. I'm sure it'll be applause.
Okay. Stacy?
All right, so for iGaming, Illinois, and for sports, I'm gonna say Massachusetts. I can't believe it. North Carolina, Georgia, and my wild card will be Maine.
Okay. Aisha, as the Massachusetts operator?
I'm going to be optimistic on Massachusetts and agree with all of Stacy's predictions, and I'm going to throw California in there because I think that we will see an answer one way or the other on California in 22. And on iGaming, in addition to Illinois, I think I would put Indiana on that list. And for mobile sports, I'm also going to say Mississippi. I think we have growing and aligning interest in Mississippi, so fingers crossed there. And my wild card will be Missouri.
Very good. Brianne?
I'm going to come at it a little different and say that I agree with the other two ladies, although I'm not sure about Missouri. And just say that I also think 2022 is going to bring about some legislative and regulatory initiatives re-examining existing states, and that mainly is coming from an RG lens because that's what I'm hearing. And in fact, legislators have been calling to say, we just heard from the Speaker of the House in Colorado a couple days ago saying, I think we got it wrong, we didn't do enough, what more do we need to do? So Colorado, New Jersey's been vocal about this. States that actually haven't even gone operational are starting to reconsider maybe if they need to make some tweaks to the language. So from my perspective, problem and responsible gambling is going to peak up in 2022 through legislation in some already operational states.
John?
On the iGaming side, I think the most promising is Indiana, with Illinois coming in there, at least where there's going to be strong discussion, but we know that there are some state-based stakeholders that are going to make that a difficult fight there that we're going to need to overcome. Massachusetts, man, I'd put them as my wild card, to be quite honest. I don't think I could ever put Massachusetts as a favorite. I do look at states like Kansas and Missouri could go hand in hand this year. One could lead the other to the promised land. And I think Mississippi is spot on. I think we'll see statewide online sports betting approved there.
Does the promised land include the yellow brick road? Sorry, bad joke.
That's how you get there, right?
Brent, you get the last word on predictions.
Well, I got to go with John a little bit on this one. I like the Midwest and the South. I like Kansas and Missouri coming into next year. I'm going to be bullish on Georgia, although I said that last time. And I like Indiana for iGaming, and I think my wild card would be Louisiana for iGaming potentially. But where I will definitely put my money is we will not see Utah pass anything in 2022.
Well, that's a bold prediction there. Very bold. So I know we're about a minute over, but I appreciate everybody's time today. I thank everybody for attending. I hope to see all of you at ICE in London in February, for those of you that make the trek. And I can't thank all of you enough for joining us today from the esteemed band of politicos out there. So thank you all, and appreciate everybody's attendance.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you very